When I was 8 years old, my family moved into an old house which was built in 1810. My father still lives there. For 9 years, until I was 17, I felt a pressure on my bed as if someone had sat down next to me every night before I fell asleep. I always felt an increase in pressure in the air at the same time. Although I knew this wasn't a common occurrence, I didn't think much about it. However, things changed when I received a cat for my 12th birthday. Each night, the cat would sleep on my bed and suddenly bolt from a dead sleep and glare at something in the doorway before running out of the room. A few moments later, the pressure on the bed would return. While this was a strange experience, I didn't question it much, thinking that maybe my cat was just nervous. I didn't talk about this to anyone, but I started referring to the feeling, or presence, as Charlotte, although I'm not sure why. One summer day when I was 13, an elderly man and his middle-aged daughter visited our house and asked if they could take a tour of the place. They explained that the man lived in the house with his aunt as a boy and later raised his family there. During the tour, my mother asked if they remembered any strange occurrences or stories about the house. The man chuckled and said that everyone who slept in one particular bedroom felt a little unsettled, and his daughter said that she always felt as if someone sat on the edge of her bed at night. Her father used to joke that it was his aunt looking out for them, his Aunt Charlotte. This confirmed what I had never admitted to myself, that I had been experiencing a ghostly presence every night for the past 5 years. Going to bed was never scary or freaky, and I just tried to ignore the feeling when it came. However, one night when I was 16, my parents were going through a difficult patch in their marriage, and I was feeling depressed. After about 20 minutes of going to bed, the cat bolted out of the room, and I felt the familiar pressure on my side. Then, I felt a hand brush through my hair. I ran straight downstairs to my mother, who was dozing in the living room. She asked me what was wrong, and I told her I had a nightmare. I spent a week sleeping in the guest room, and when I went back to my room, I realized that I didn't feel the pressure next to me, but I still felt pressure in the air. I rolled on my back and saw the figure of a woman in her 60s wearing a house dress. Her hair was pulled back in a bun, her arms folded. She was looking right at me, appearing very concerned. When I found my voice, she disappeared. I said out loud, "I don't care if you stay, but I can never see you again." And I never did. A few years later, after my parents divorced, and my dad moved in his girlfriend and her 4-year-old son, I wasn't really surprised when she told me her little boy said a lady named Charlotte told him stories at night. Last year, I stayed in a hotel with my mom. One night, while lying in bed, I noticed a human-shaped shadow about 2 meters away from me. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a shadow, but it persisted. When I turned the light on, it disappeared, but reappeared when I turned off the light again. I searched the room but found nothing that could have caused the shadow. It looked exactly like a human silhouette, and it hadn't been there the previous nights. Even though I never believed in ghosts before, I was terrified. I eventually fell asleep with my back turned to the shadow. The next morning, I told my mom about the experience, but she shrugged it off as my imagination. However, a few days later, when we were back home, my mom brought up the shadow, revealing that she had seen it too. She didn't want to scare me at the time, but she believed that it might have been the ghost of her recently deceased best friend, who she had just written a letter for to get closure before we went to bed that night. I was working a night shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. at a bone marrow transplant unit with only one other nurse. We had 5 patients, and it was 3:30 a.m. when my coworker came out of room 4. She was startled as the bathroom door closed on her while she was emptying a urinal, causing her to spill urine on herself. She told me that a young man who had been in that room had died a gruesome death. Apparently, he was supposed to be discharged, but one night around 4 a.m., the nurses heard a thump. When they rushed in the room, the man was in the bathroom with his central line out and blood everywhere. Despite their efforts to save him, he died right there. Nobody knows why he pulled his line or what had happened, but the scene was horrific. A few weeks later, an elderly patient was in that same room and asked the nurse if someone had died in there. When the nurse confirmed that it was a hospital and it was possible, the patient replied that she believed a young man had died there because he was talking to her. Later, the nurse found that one of the patient's triple lumen central lines was cut, not pulled out. There were no scissors in the room. The patient claimed that the young man had done it. I often struggle with sleeping, so a few nights every week I stay up very late. One particular night, it was around 2 a.m. when something strange happened. As a habit, I always lock my bedroom door before I sleep, especially since I moved away from home. However, on that night, my brother was staying with me but ended up staying somewhere else without letting me know. Suddenly, I heard my bedroom door creaking open. I called out to my brother, but he did not answer. When I checked, there was no one there. I called out again, but still no response. Although I don't scare easily, I felt eyes on me. I got up and started checking each room in my house one by one. It was one of the most terrifying situations I've experienced for no apparent reason. Maybe it was just an issue with the doorframe. I ended up staying awake all night, and ever since then I've never felt alone in the house. I've been hearing strange noises more and more often, especially a scratching sound coming from my closet. After investigating, I realized that it was just a small steel wire rubbing against the door. However, when I stopped it and closed the door, the scratching sound started up again a few seconds later and stopped just before I opened the door again. I've researched for answers, and some people believe that an opening door symbolizes the start of a new path in life. However, my grandfather also passed away in the house, so I can't help but think that he may still be around. At the end of the day, it could just be that I forgot to fully close the door, and the changing pressure in the house made it open. However, I always make sure to give it a good push and hear the lock click just in case.